Marilyn von Savant once said, if your head tells you one thing and your heart tells you another, before you do anything, you should first decide whether you have a better head or a better heart. Marilyn von Savant was the person with the highest IQ ever recorded, and I am Christina Kapatou, definitely with a lot lower. Today I'm here to talk about my story, a story that has defined the better half of me and one that contains two very contradicting dilemmas. When I was 19, just a little after high school, I was living the life that most of us have imagined during our senior year. Friends, parties, work, and fun. A routine check at my gynecologist came to change things a little. Stage 1 cervical neoplasia. At this time, I hadn't yet understood how serious this was, and therefore I treated it as if it was just something I had to get out of the way. Following the diagnosis, I had my first surgery. Thinking it was over, I continued living the life I had previously. About 14 months later, it was time for my next checkup. Given that the university was in Chios, I visited a local island on the clinic. A week later, I called the reception to ask if I can visit and obtain my results. I still remember her nervousness on the phone when she said the following words, and I quote, "The doctor has left a note to speak to you personally." And I did. To be honest, I had already understood that something was not right. I cannot recall the journey to the clinic, but I do recall the doctor's final words telling me that I must travel back to Athens as they don't have what is needed here to treat me. And there it began. After a series of tests and biopsies, I had my second diagnosis, only this time with a more advanced stage. The doctor who took on my case and who still is with me today tried to keep me calm and had faith that things might get better miraculously by themselves. When things weren't improving, though, he talked to me about a second surgery. The problem with the second surgery, though, wasn't the procedure. The problem was that by proceeding to it, I would no longer be able to have biological children. It was given, you see, that my body would not make it through a pregnancy. I was facing a dilemma, right there in front of me. It was at this time that I had to make a decision, either move forward to a surgery that meant that I will not be able to give birth to any child, or wait and have faith that things might get better. I'll be honest, it was one of the hardest decisions that I have ever made because it meant that I would rule out an option for my future self. Most of the people around me were against my decision to undergo the whole medical procedure. What helped me, though, was that it was my decision to make. It was a decision that when the years passed, I had to look back and say that I was the only person who decided for my body. And I did. I programmed it for November 30th, 2018. As is expected before the surgery, I had to see a few doctors for the pre-op standard procedure. One of the most defining moments was that during one of my visits, a doctor measures the part that must be removed and looks at me, 20 years old at the time, and says, "We can stall the surgery if you want to have a child now." I froze, and as soon as my brain finished during over 100 different branches of possible options, I replied that I can't. Now, I'm not here today to tell you that when people reach dilemmas, it is easy to choose an option. In contrary, it takes courage, it takes thought, strong nerves, and sometimes even carelessness. But by making a choice, it doesn't mean things can't change. After the surgery, I felt relieved. I was relieved not because I believed 100% that I had made the right choice, but because I didn't need to think about it anymore. What was done was done. But sometimes life gets in the way, and what today you might think is final, tomorrow is just a previous situation. Moving to 2019, less than a year later, I get my third diagnosis. While I'm at my doctor's office, panting that I can't do this anymore, screaming, crying, and I might have even bullied him a bit, I made my final decision that it is time to remove my entire uterus. He looks at me and persuades me to wait just a couple of more weeks before I actually finalize the date, just in case I regain my faith. What I didn't know at the time is that I was in front of a very surprising situation and yet my second dilemma. 3 days later, and just only 1 day after my expected menstrual date, there it was, not one, but 3 positive pregnancy tests. Some might call it a miracle, some a God-sent gift, and perhaps a coincidence or even fate. I don't know exactly what it was, but I can tell you one thing's for sure. It was my little miracle. I had spent the last years thinking that this would never happen to me, and right there in front of me, I had a positive sign, and inside of me, a baby. Now, everyone would think that I was blown with happiness right away, but truth is, I was again put in a dilemma. When I spoke to my doctor, he told me that this might be my only shot. When I visited my obstetrician and his team, they all told me the same thing. It's going to be very difficult. The odds aren't in my favor. But I knew that I had to fight for this. Yes, it came earlier. Yes, I wasn't prepared, but we all know that most things in life happen when you least expect them. At my first visits and ultrasounds, they told me that I must reach the 6th month for the baby to survive in case I go into labor earlier. I not only exceeded their expectations, but I reached all 40 weeks. My doctor thinks till this day that it's primarily due to my psychology and my will. I'll be honest, choosing what I will do didn't come easy. But when I look into my son's eyes every day, I know I made the right decision. When I was brought in front of the options, I didn't know what to do, but I did know one thing, and that was that I wanted to become a mother, even if it came earlier than what I initially had thought about. A phrase I have kept through these years is that you don't know how strong you are until you actually have to be strong. And it's true. If somebody told me 10 years ago that all of these things, aside with some others, were going to happen, I would have told them, all right, lock me up in a room because there's no way I can put up with them. But it's false. Not only did I put up, but I have my son probably sleeping in his room right now. Look, it's not always going to be easy. It's also going to be very hard. But I guarantee you that when you look back at the decision you made, you'll know that you gave it all you had, even if things turned out completely different than what you expected. You see, as much as we all like to plan things, life doesn't. What matters at the end of each day is that knowing you don't have any regrets and that you fought for what you wanted, because nothing is more difficult than thinking, what if? So do it. Make the choice that you're leaning a little more towards to. Take a moment and think. Weigh things. There is always one choice that makes us sleep better at night. What sums up my story is a quote from Albert Einstein, which I try to remember even on the difficult mornings that I have to wake up at 6:30. There are only 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. Thank you.